My husband gives me designer bags every time he came back late smelling like another woman's shower, so I started buying him expensive shoes every time I went out alone, and within 2 weeks, he was begging to know where I'd been. My husband Leo and I got married when I was 24. He was 26 and had just gotten promoted at his firm. We had a nice apartment, we split cooking duties, and every Friday we'd pick a movie and order Thai food. It was simple, and I liked it. About a year into the marriage, he came home one Tuesday with a gift bag. Inside was a designer purse. Not our anniversary, not my birthday, no reason at all. I thanked him and asked what the occasion was. He said he just saw it and thought of me. I thought it was sweet. 3 weeks later, he came home with another one. Different brand, same setup, no reason, just because. I thanked him again. Then I noticed his phone was face down on the counter. It used to always sit face up. A month after that, another bag. This time, he was late coming home from work by 2 hours. When I asked where he was, he said the office had a thing. The next morning, I found a receipt in his coat pocket from a restaurant I'd never heard of. Table for two. That's when it clicked. The bags weren't gifts. They were apologies for things he was never going to admit to. Once I figured out the pattern, it was impossible to unsee. Every time he came home smelling like he'd just showered somewhere else, a bag would show up within the week. Every time he had a work dinner that ended after midnight, I'd find a box on the counter by morning. He never bought me flowers. He never wrote me a card. It was always bags. He had a system. He'd figured out the price of keeping me quiet, and it landed somewhere between $300 and $800, depending on how guilty he felt. The worst part was how casual he was about it. He'd hand me the bag, sit down, eat dinner, and ask me about my day. He was comfortable. He thought the bags were working. He thought I was a woman who liked purses and didn't ask questions, so I let him believe that. For months, I accepted every single one. I smiled. I said thank you. I noticed which nights he came home late and which mornings he left early. I noticed when he started keeping a spare shirt in his car. By the end of that first year, he'd given me 6 bags. 6. Each time he'd watch me open it, wait for me to smile, and go right back to whatever he was doing. He never once thought I'd figure it out. Then one afternoon, I was out with my friend Janelle, and I walked past a shoe store. I saw a nice pair of loafers in the window and bought them for Leo. Brought them home in a bag. Set them on the dining table. When he got home, he looked at the bag and asked what it was. I told him I got him shoes. He asked why. I said I just saw them and thought of him. The next week, I went out on a Wednesday night. Told him I was getting drinks with Janelle. Came home around 11. The next morning, I left a box of sneakers on his nightstand. He looked at the box, looked at me, and asked if I went shopping after drinks. I said yes. He didn't say anything else, but I watched him sit with that box on his lap for a while. The following week, I bought him 2 pairs. One on Monday after I went out for dinner alone. One on Thursday after I told him I had plans. Both times I came back late. By the second pair, he asked me where I was going on a weeknight. I told him I had a thing. He asked what kind of thing. I said just a thing and grabbed my keys. When I got home, he was sitting on the couch with both shoe boxes next to him. He asked if everything was okay between us. I said everything was great and gave him a pair of driving moccasins. That weekend, I went out Saturday afternoon and came back with boots. Sunday, I left early and came home with dress shoes. Monday after work, I brought home another pair of loafers. By Wednesday, he had 9 new pairs of shoes in 2 weeks, and he could barely hold a conversation without asking me where I'd been. He started texting me every 15 minutes when I went out. He wanted to know who I was with and when I'd be back. He wanted to know why I was going out so much. He asked to look through my phone one night, and I handed it to him without hesitation because there was nothing on it. He went through every text, every call, every app. He found nothing. That made it worse. He couldn't locate a single thing, and it was eating him alive. He asked me if everything was okay. He asked me if I was happy. He told his mother I was acting different, and she called me to ask if I was happy in my marriage. I told her I was very happy, and that I had just bought Leo a gorgeous pair of Oxford shoes. She didn't know what to do with that. The following Friday, I came home with 2 bags, one from a shoe store and one from a department store, and set them both on the dining table. Leo sat across from me and stared. He asked me why I kept buying him shoes. I said the same reason you keep buying me bags. He went still. I let the silence do its work. He thought he was the only one playing this game. He had no idea I'd been keeping score the whole time. Leo sat there for close to a full minute without speaking. Then he got up, went to the bedroom, and came back carrying all 6 designer bags by the handles. He lined them up on the bed and pointed at them and said every single one he bought because he loved me, and I turned it into some kind of game. I told him that was interesting because I had receipts too. I walked to the dresser, pulled an envelope from behind my jewelry box, and held up the restaurant receipt I'd found in his coat months ago. I said, "Who did you take to dinner that night?" The performance drained out of him in 2 seconds. He said it was a work dinner. Fast, like he'd practiced it. Like the answer had been sitting in a drawer in his brain labeled in case she asks. I nodded slowly. A work dinner. Table for 2. Candles on every table. $200 check. He didn't answer. He pivoted instead. Said I'd been going out every night for 2 weeks. Wouldn't say where, wouldn't say who with, and did I think he was the one with a problem? I said, "I handed you my phone, Leo. You went through everything. You found nothing. Now hand me yours." The room went quiet. His hand moved toward his pocket and stopped. His fingers pressed against the outside of his jeans where the phone was sitting and didn't move. He said this wasn't about phones. I said, "Then what's it about?" He looked at the bags on the bed, at the receipt in my hand, and had nothing. That's when he told me his mother was coming over the next day to talk. I knew exactly what that was. He wasn't bringing Jacinta in for a conversation. He was calling backup. He wanted her in our living room so he could play the worried husband while she asked me gentle questions. He wanted to turn this into a discussion about my behavior instead of his. What Leo didn't know was that Jacinta had already called me the week before. She asked if I was happy. I told her I was, and I told her about the shoes. I told her the same thing I'd just said to Leo at the dining table. That conversation planted a seed whether Jacinta knew it or not. Jacinta showed up the next afternoon around 2. She hugged Leo first, rubbing his back the way mothers do when they think their kid is hurting. Then she hugged me, careful and measured, and sat down on the couch with her hands folded in her lap. Leo sat next to her, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, and said she needed to know his wife had been going out almost every night for 2 weeks. Wouldn't say where or who with, kept buying him shoes, and when he asked about it, she changed the subject. He said he was scared something was going on. His voice had just the right amount of shake in it. Soft, worried eyes, hands clasped together like he was holding himself in one one piece. If I didn't know about the bags and the receipts and the showers that didn't match any gym, I would have believed him too. Jacinta turned to me and said I could tell her if something was going on. I let the quiet sit for a moment. Then I said, Jacinta, when Leo was growing up, did he ever give you gifts out of nowhere? Nice gifts for no reason? She tilted her head, thought about it, smiled a little. She said he was always a generous boy, with pride. I nodded. Then I said, he still is. He's given me 6 designer bags in 1 year. Not on my birthday, not on our anniversary, not on any holiday. Always after a late night. Always after he came home smelling like he just got out of a shower that wasn't ours. Isn't that interesting? The room temperature dropped. Jacinta's smile faded slowly, muscle by muscle. Her eyes moved from me to Leo, and Leo felt it. His whole body tightened. He jumped in fast, voice higher than before, said I was twisting things, that buying your wife a gift wasn't a crime, that I took something good and made it look bad. But Jacinta wasn't nodding along anymore. She was quiet. The kind of quiet that means someone is counting things in their head, matching dates with guilt, and late nights with excuses she might have heard somewhere before. After a long moment, she turned to Leo and said, why did you call me here? He repeated himself, going out every night, won't say where, all these shoes, something is wrong. He was back on the same script because he didn't have a second one. Jacinta looked at him for a long time, then at me, then back at him, and she said, different how? Because from where I'm sitting, she sounds like she's paying attention. Leo didn't have a move after that. No bag to hand me, no pivot, no script. Just his mother looking at him with eyes that weren't angry but weren't soft anymore either. She left 20 minutes later, hugged me at the door, and held on longer than usual. The second it closed, Leo changed. He paced, jaw tight, and then stopped and looked at me and said I'd embarrassed him in front of his mother. I told him I answered her questions honestly. He pointed in my direction and said, you made me sound like I'm buying you off. The way his voice cracked just slightly on the last word told me he'd heard himself, because that was exactly what it was. I said, are you? He opened his mouth, his chest lifted, nothing came out. He closed his mouth, walked to the bedroom, and shut the door. Not a slam, just firm and quiet. The kind that says I'm done talking more than any slam ever could. The next 3 days were the quietest our apartment had ever been. Leo barely spoke. Yes, no, fine. He was home on time every single night. Not a minute late, no work dinners, no mysterious showers, nothing. He was overcorrecting, being so perfectly present that it made things worse, because it proved he could do it. He could come home at 6 if he wanted to. He just hadn't wanted to before. Every night after dinner, he'd take his phone into the bathroom and run the faucet, but the sound didn't cover what I could hear through the door. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm of someone going through messages one by one and deleting them. Call logs, photos, 3 nights straight. He'd come out with the phone face down on the nightstand and get into bed and turn away from me without saying a word. He thought the faucet was enough to hide it. He thought he was being careful, but I could hear every single tap through that thin door, and each one told me exactly what I needed to know. A man with nothing to hide doesn't spend 20 minutes scrubbing his phone every night for 3 nights in a row. I went to see Janelle on the 4th night. I told her everything, start to finish. She listened with her whole body, and when I finished, she put down her glass and said I needed to find out who she was. Not for him, for me. So I could make a decision with the full picture. She knew someone who worked at the restaurant from the receipt. She could find out if Leo had a regular reservation and who he was coming in with. I sat with that for a minute. Everything up to this point I could explain as a wife paying attention, but making a call to find out who my husband was having dinner with, that was choosing to know. And once you know, you can't unknow it. I thought about the 6 bags on the shelf, the 9 pairs of shoes in the closet, Leo in the bathroom every night, tap, 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 deleting whatever he needed to delete to keep his version of things alive. I said, make the call. By the next morning, Janelle had a name and one detail that made my chest burn in a way I didn't expect. Leo wasn't just having dinners. He had a standing reservation every other Tuesday for the past 5 months. I spent the next 2 days building something that couldn't be argued with. I pulled the receipt out of the envelope and set it on the dining table. Then I went to the closet and checked each of the 6 designer bags. Inside each one, starting around bag 3 when the pattern first clicked, I'd put a small sticky note with the date I received it. I don't know exactly why I started doing that. Maybe some part of me already knew. Bag 1, a Tuesday in March. Bag 2, a Tuesday in April. 3, 4, 5, 6, all Tuesdays or within a day. Every single one matched a night he came home late, smelled wrong, or had an excuse with a hole in it. I checked the reservation schedule Janelle had gotten me. Every other Tuesday. 5 months, the dates locked together like teeth on a zipper. On the second day, I picked up the phone and called Jacinta. My hands were steady. My voice was steady. She answered on the 3rd ring in that warm way she always did, and I said hi and told her I had a question for her. She said, okay. I took a breath and asked if Leo's father ever bought her gifts for no reason. The line went quiet. Not thinking quiet, deciding quiet. Then she said, almost to herself, jewelry. Always jewelry. After every business trip. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. I thanked her and hung up and counted the seconds. Almost exactly 10 minutes later, her name lit up my screen. She didn't say hello. She said, whatever you're about to do, I think you should do it. And I think I need to be there. I told her Friday night. She said, I should have done this a long time ago. Not for you, for me. That night, I told Leo we needed to talk. Friday. No yelling, no accusations, just a real conversation. His shoulders dropped in relief. He asked if he could cook. I said sure. He smiled for the first time in over a week, and I knew what that smile meant. He thought he'd won. He thought 3 days of being home on time and scrubbing his phone had cleared the trail, and now we were resetting. He had no idea what Friday actually was. He cooked my favorite, cream sauce, little bits of bacon, the nice plates we only used for company. He poured wine and pulled out my chair and asked about my week, asked if I wanted more bread. Every gesture was a performance. The version of Leo that bought bags. Guilt, gift, charm, repeat. And here he was running the program one more time. We finished eating around 7:30. Leo was at the sink humming to himself when there was a knock at the door. He turned around with a dish still in his hand and water dripping from his fingers. I walked to the door and opened it. Jacinta was standing there in a dark blouse, reading glasses pushed up on her head, the same firm expression from the phone call. Leo said, Mom, what are you doing here? His voice came out thin, like a kid who walked into the principal's office and found his parents already seated. Jacinta stepped inside, walked past both of us, us, sat down on the couch, folded her hands in her lap, and said, "Your wife invited me, and I think it's time we all stopped pretending." Leo looked at me, then at Jacinta, then back at me. The dish tilted in his hand and water ran down his wrist onto the floor. The humming was gone. The charming Friday night husband was gone. Standing in his place was a man who'd just realized the dinner wasn't a peace offering. I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope, laid the restaurant receipt flat on the coffee table, and smoothed it with my hand. I said, "This fell out of your coat 4 months ago. Table for 2, a place I've never been." He glanced at it. He already knew what it said. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and said it was a work dinner. Same words, same flat delivery, same answer from the same drawer in his brain. I opened the notes app on my phone and started reading. Bag 1, the date, the late night, the shower he took that wasn't at home. Bag 2, 3, all the way through 6. 6 bags, 6 dates, each one anchored to a night with a hole in it. When I finished, I said, "Every single one of these lines up with a late night, a shower you didn't take here, or a dinner you didn't eat here." He stared at the table, then looked up and said I'd been tracking him. Not a question, a statement. Like that was the crime. That's when Jacinta spoke. She'd been still the whole time. She took a breath and looked at her son and said, "Leo, your father used to buy me jewelry after every business trip. I pretended not to notice for 12 years. I'm not going to watch your wife do the same thing." Leo stared at his mother, his arms uncrossed, his hands dropped to his knees. He said it wasn't the same thing, voice soft now, almost pleading. Jacinta looked at him the way a mother looks at her grown son when she knows he's lying, and she's done letting him get away with it. She said, "Then explain the standing reservation every other Tuesday for 5 months." His head snapped toward me, eyes wide. He said, "How do you know about that?" He wasn't performing anymore. The receipt on the table, the dates on my phone, the reservation, each one was a wall closing in, and there was nowhere left to go. He stood up and walked to the window and stood there with his back to both of us, hands gripping the sill, looking out at the street below. I watched his reflection in the glass, just barely, enough to see his eyes moving like he was searching for something out there that could save him, some word, some exit, some version of events that would make all of this disappear. I let the silence press on him, long enough to hear the clock on the wall ticking, the same clock I'd heard the night at the dining table when I first said the line about the shoes, long enough that Jacinta shifted on the couch and recrossed her ankles. Then he spoke without turning around, low, from somewhere he didn't usually let people hear from. He said it wasn't what I thought. I said, "Then tell me what it is, right now, in front of your mother. No bags, no distractions, just the truth." He turned around, walked to the counter near the stove, and put both hands flat on the surface and dropped his head between his arms. His shoulders were rounded and his back bent, and he looked smaller than I'd ever seen him look. His fingers pressed into the surface so hard the tips went white. He stayed like that for a while, head down, breathing, and I could see from across the room that he was done looking for exits. After a long moment, he said, quietly, almost a whisper, "I've been seeing someone. It started as nothing. It's been going on for about 5 months." The room stopped. I knew it was coming. I'd built the whole list because I knew. But hearing it out loud, hearing his voice form those words in our apartment with his mother sitting 3 feet away, it felt different than knowing. Knowing is quiet. Hearing it is loud even when it's whispered. Jacinta closed her eyes. She didn't gasp. She just closed them and held one slow, heavy breath. I asked the only question that mattered. "Were you ever going to tell me?" Leo turned around, eyes red, right at the edge. He said he thought he could stop. That every time he bought me a bag, he told himself it was the last time, that he'd end it. His voice cracked on the word end. I said, "But you didn't." He said, "No, nothing after it. No excuse, no pivot, just no." I said, "And the shoes? When I started buying you shoes and going out, what did that feel like?" His face crumbled. He said it felt like he was losing me, like I was doing what he was doing and he couldn't stand it. I nodded. Then I said, "I wasn't doing anything, Leo. I was buying shoes and eating dinner alone. That's all it took to make you feel what you've been putting me through for a year." He had nothing for that. Jacinta stood up from the couch and walked to Leo. She stood in front of her son and looked up at him and said, "I love you, but she deserved better than this, and you knew it every time you handed her a bag." Leo slid down the front of the cabinet until he was sitting on the floor with his back against the wood, knees pulled up, hands hanging between them. He wasn't performing. He wasn't scanning for the next move. He was just sitting there being exactly what he was. I looked at him and I said, "I'm not going to scream at you. I'm not going to break things, but I need you to hear me. The bags never worked. I knew every single time. I stayed because I wanted to give you the chance to be honest. You didn't take it. So now I'm going to make a decision based on what I know, not what you wanted me to believe. And whatever I decide, you're going to respect it because you owe me that." He nodded once, head back against the cabinet, eyes on the floor. No argument, no charm, no bags, just a nod. Jacinta put her hand on my shoulder and squeezed. Not a hug. Something more than that. The kind of touch that says, "I understand exactly where you're standing because I've stood somewhere like it a long time ago and didn't have anyone do this for me." I picked up the restaurant receipt from the coffee table, folded it once, and put it in my pocket. Then I walked to the front door and stepped outside. The air was cool. I stood on the walkway and breathed.